So, gonna take us live now. Damn, all right, so we go over here to Facebook. I think we are live. And we are. All right, cool beans. All right, well, hello world. This is Rich Hayden with Home First Mortgage, as I do with every time I go live. I just want to make sure that we make sure to remind everybody, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Absolutely. And then I'm really happy to welcome Kyle Arganbright. Kyle is a multi-dimensional person for sure. Guy's got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'll let him talk about himself. But just by way of introduction, he's currently the mayor of Valentine, Nebraska, chief development officer for Sandhills State Bank in Valentine, is a co-founder of Bolo Beer Company in Valentine, and what else am I missing? You've got some ranching interests in north central Nebraska as well. Just all around busy guy, doing stuff on the ground and really kind of making things go. So, Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and correct what I screwed up?
No worries. Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Valentine, Nebraska. Went to school at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And did some grad school there too in ag finance, ag economics, rural economics, and had lived, briefly in DC, Virginia, and had a job where I traveled around quite a bit too. So got to see the country, but realized Valentine and the Nebraska Sandhills were a really special place, and I wanted to get back here. So moved back about 10 years ago when we started Sandhills State Bank. I'm married. My wife, Amy, is from Omaha, West Omaha. I joked that I made her dreams come true and moved her to Valentine. Nearest Target is 3 hours away. And she has a dance studio that she started here, which is awesome. And she's the registered dietitian at the hospital. And then I have two little girls, Claire, who's 5, and Jules, who is 2 and full of it. So.
Awesome. Well, that I dig that. I wanted to just real quick. So anybody who's watching, I haven't been drinking all day. Doing a chemical peel makes me look even better. So that I've made my living through my good looks. So that's what's going on there. But just the rationale and the desire to bring Kyle on today comes from a couple things. I'd been talking to one of the other founders of Sandhills State Bank, a friend of mine named David Gale. Shout out, David. About hey, why don't you come on and tell us what's going on? And a couple of these lives I've done recently have been relative to COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what's the impact of that? Because we hear a lot of stuff, we see a lot of stuff, but the reality is on the ground is different for all of us. I was fortunate to be able to host a panel with some guys that you probably know, Kyle, the other night, at least one, Tom Massey and his older brother John, some Nebraskans, and it was a whole panel of Nebraskans actually. But talk about this on the ground where the rubbers meet in the road. But you have a very unique perspective, at least from my point of view, on all this. And David said, hey, you should really talk to Kyle because you're the mayor of a jurisdiction, right? Of a town of anywhere from 2,800 to 3,000, if my research is correct, from current population of Valentine. You are a business owner in two senses. One being the bank, the other being Bolo Beer Company, and then, as the mayor of the town, you've got responsibilities that may at times be at odds with what the business owner might have. And then as the banker, you've got responsibilities that other business owners have to pay attention to. And you've got an understanding of what they go through. And then, I think what I talked about in sharing a chat with you last night is a unique perspective also, is that Valentine is very much an interstate economy city. And so how does all of this affect you, right now? I mean, we've got, certainly here in Virginia, our governor has told us, hey, stay-at-home order is in place through June 10th. That doesn't work real well in an ag community, because then there's no food for everybody else. But then, there's other pieces of Valentine that are affected by something like that. And I don't think Governor Ricketts has issued a stay-at-home order, at least not as of this morning that I had seen. So let me shut up and kind of see what your thoughts are right now.
Yeah, and the different hats I wear all help with one another. Serving as mayor, it's technically city council president, but serving as mayor and as an executive with the bank, banks go as communities go. If a bank makes a good loan, the bank wins, the customer wins, the community wins. It's interests are really well aligned there, and we've got a lot. We've got a lot of public duty too. We're a regulated industry, and we exist to facilitate commerce in the country. And so, that perspective is helpful. And then from the mayor perspective, we're always trying to grow the economy. And you've got private capital, you've got bank capital. And then as we're seeing right now, you've got federal capital, often through SBA, and you've got local municipal capital, typically through revolving loan funds or other programs that can be used there. So all of those things work together. But the interesting thing of all of this is, at the bank side, we've tried to really stay ahead of this coronavirus pandemic. I remember our first IT examination, they asked us for our pandemic plan. I kind of chuckled a little bit, and I said, if a pandemic's ever going to hit, it's going to hit the Sandhills last. We'll just be able to figure out whatever everybody else has done to be good, Well, they were right, and it seems like I was a little bit right too. It's hit here in a delayed fashion, but we've got to be able to provide services, essential services, to our community. All of these pandemics, or this pandemic. So, banking is an essential service, as is sewer and water and electricity. And there's some other, really important services provided by municipalities and counties and other government entities that we've got to make sure we continue to provide. So it's been an interesting perspective seeing it through both lenses, but I think it's helped both sides. Hold on, I lost you here on sound, Rich.
You're good. So I still have my mute on. My bad. I'm the technical guy. Before we came on, we were talking just a tiny bit, and you'd mentioned something about the hospital, and it reminded me. I was born in a small town in Loudonville, Ohio. My dad, I think it was 60 bed facility, and this call we had the other night, we're talking to John Massey, who has offices, for his practice all over the state, and talking about that. And, as a city council president, mayor, banker, in that community, what's kind of the vibe at the hospital right now? Folks don't necessarily roll in unless they have to. But what kind of sense is there on the ground right now? It will come to you guys later, not necessarily last, certainly later, but are people looking through the closets and going, do we have enough stuff? And how do we handle this? Are you getting a feel from that from anybody?
Yeah, so I participate in our emergency management planning meetings, and the hospital is obviously a part of that. There's also the sheriff, the city manager, county attorney, county members. We've invited the schools. We've invited the head of the ministerial association, and then folks with assisted living centers. And so a little context on our hospital. It's a critical access hospital, really strong hospital, but we have 19 beds, and we serve, our service area probably includes over 20,000 people. We have 2 doctors and a few PAs, great, and also a surgeon, great people. We have some specialty clinics, so people can get hip and knee replacements up here. We do a lot of OB, but really, if things get serious with a patient out here, oftentimes they fly them out, and we have an emergency plane to do so. So, the hospital, they're battle tested. They're ready for this. They're calm, but they're serious. It's something that we are taking every precaution to get ahead of, just to make sure that we can continue to service the people. But in the end, the biggest issue is it's not necessarily hospital beds; it's people to care for those people in the hospital beds, and that's what we're seeing in some of those major metro areas too. So, interesting side note with our hospital, we have a new hospital administrator. He started 2 weeks ago on Monday.
Well,
the first time I met him was at an
welcome
emergency
to town.
Yeah, and but the blessing is he came from Washington, where they'd already had some impact from coronavirus, and so I actually didn't see his face. He was kind of like Mr. Wilson in Home Improvement. He had to wear a mask for the first 2 weeks that he was here, just to follow proper safety protocol. But his insight and his connections to that Washington hospital and medical system has been really helpful in keeping Valentine ahead of the curve, given just the reality of we've got very few beds.
One of the other kind of unique things about where you guys are, you and I talked a little bit last week, kind of, noodling through doing this call, and Valentine's an interesting place. It's I think you referred to it as the 3 R's, right? So you've got ranching, you've got the river, and then you've got the reservation. Why don't you talk about each one of those things a little bit, just in terms of what it means to have a really diverse economy in that way, but also one that is so reliant, in some ways on the weather, and in other ways, what's the dynamic of something like this as it relates to the reservation, and what is that reservation? What's that look like, for ground?
Yeah, so Valentine was founded in the 1880s, and it was an army base to help protect settlers, or prevent fights between settlers and the reservation that was just north of town. So our founding was kind of interesting in terms of the relationship. It grew to where this area provided beef to the reservation as well. It's an interesting dynamic, though. There's a lot of great people up there, and they're really doing good things, and we have good relationships with them. But it's 9 miles to the state line, so there's often there's different state laws that are in effect. The communication channels are different. In fact, there was a case confirmed up there, and it took us a few days to get those channels really dialed in between the State Department of Health for Nebraska and South Dakota. And they have their own challenges, but also opportunities because they're a sovereign nation. So Valentine, there's a lot of people in Valentine that work up there, and it's great jobs, and they're doing great work for the people of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. We also serve as a retail center for the Rosebud Sioux tribe. So there's 15 to 20,000, maybe a little bit more people living within the tribal boundaries, and those people rely upon Valentine in many cases for retail services and entertainment. So that economic impact is real. Go ahead, Rich.
No, I was just going to say. So I mean, I've said this so many times, either in talking to you or to myself, as I've thought about this call today. Is I don't know that many people who may be watching this from wherever kind of fully comprehend what that means, and what the uniqueness of being an upper Midwesterner means, to really kind of have a worldview that is not what I think a lot of folks on the coast think it is. Because I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The Rosebud Reservation is a sovereign nation in and of itself. So they have their own laws and customs and norms that that they follow. You've got the state of South Dakota, which has it's in its own way a unique thing, and so you've got to work together really across 3 different. And then you've got the state of Nebraska that you've got to follow, and plus whatever your own local regulations, guidelines, et cetera, are to facilitate commerce, to facilitate healthcare, to facilitate law enforcement, public health, on and on, and education and healthcare. You know, how do all those things come together? It's just fascinating to me that you're kind of really the epicenter of, you know, a multicultural environment, and you've got a you know, maybe not as much as other parts of the state with a migrant community doing, you know, seasonal work, but you may have that as well. And so it's just, you know, it's a lot more, I think, than a lot of people really realize to handle on a daily basis when things are really, you know, turning and burning. You get into the summer, and then you get the tourist community coming in to work the river or to come to the river. Then that's a whole other ball of wax. And, you know, what does that look like?
Yeah. You know, with the reservation relationship, it's dependent upon our ability to work together out here. Our nearest Walmart is 2 hours. Our nearest Target is 3 hours. We are the middle of nowhere. Our county is the size of Rhode Island, and it has fewer than 6,000 people. It's out there, and we're really far from services. So we have to have this real independence, but we've got an interdependence with the reservation. You know, our ambulance service has a contract to serve parts of that area. And so we've got to be in good touch with them. So now our ambulance service area is partly in a county that has had a confirmed case, yet we don't have one in our home county. So it's interesting, but that's, you know, that independence is just pretty thick up here anyway. The ranching, I mean, there's people that live 60 miles from town out here. Right now is calving season. So they're pretty adept at social distancing anyway. They're out there for 30 to 60 days, you know, them and the cows, making sure that those cows deliver healthy babies and serving those animals' needs. So last year we had crazy snowstorms. We had 24 to 30-inch snowstorms over a day and a half, right in the middle of calving season. So you have really, really small, susceptible animals that are, you know, that are just subject to these weather patterns. And we saw some pretty significant loss out here as a result. We thought we were getting through this year without an issue, and then the pandemic hit. So it's just, you know, ranching gets hit by everything. There's economic, obviously economics at play. There's science at play. There's weather at play. There's luck at play. And these people have, you know, they've got to sell cattle to eat, and that's a different world, I think, for a lot of places on the coast to understand exactly how this works. When you've got one crop and you sell it over the course of a month or two, and that depends how much you make that year.
Talk a little bit, if you could. So, you know, Valentine is you mentioned it, right? The county has 6,000 people. But how many kids? I mean, what's education look like right now? I mean, you know, for those, well, I'll stop saying that. It's just, you know, you got smaller schools and kids got to travel further to get to them, right? And so what does that look like right now? Have you guys shut school down? I assume so. If not, that's coming, I would imagine, very, very soon. And then, you know, I know what's going to happen. Those kids are going to start working. Because that's what you do. If you're not in school, you're moving something. So what does that look like right now?
Did you catch any of that? That was so good. Jeez. Now you're muted. The schools have been shut down for a couple weeks. They've been really cautious. That, you know, that guidance. Nebraska is taking a tailored approach to the shutdown. So the state uses data from the local entities and the regional health districts to determine what measures to put in place there. It's slowly getting to where everyone's in a directed health measure, is what they call it, which is more stringent in terms of size of gatherings and reasons for travel. But the school's been on top of it. These kids are expected, though, to continue to receive instruction. And so it's been interesting to see how quickly the school transitioned, you know, to virtual school. And so in a lot of cases, they have Chromebooks, and they're pushing instruction over those Chromebooks. There's been some cool Zoom activity just for interaction. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think they're doing a really good job. There's a lot of kids though that are working. I know of a couple that are out on ranches helping calve. Probably don't have cell phone service and likely don't have internet service at that ranch. So
Right.
we'll see what the teacher says here in a couple of weeks when they come back to Earth.
Right. Well, it actually brings up an interesting point. What is broadband like in a rural environment?
It's terrible. It is terrible. I couldn't stream Netflix at my house until about, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years ago,
Right.
which is the most frustrating thing ever. No, it's, we're the end of the line on everything. And even out in the country, so we've got a big project going on with one of the big telcos to bring fiber to these ranches. But what they found is, telcos have switches, and so from that switch it feeds out, to the end of the line of that switch. Well, one switch went into South Dakota, and so these South Dakotans had been paying into this public service fund for like 40 years and never got the benefit of these monies from the state. So finally they figured this out and they said, okay, the whole switch is getting replaced now. But that technology is the old party line technology. So you'll call sometimes and it'll end up at a house you're not trying to call. This is in the ranch. Or, we had floods last year. The water made some telephone lines completely unusable. Gophers do the same. So, but it's that's a serious issue. If people are out there and they've got, they need emergency services, how do you get it? Because cell phone coverage doesn't cover all the way out here either.
Right. Yeah, and it's a public safety pitch, right? For you as and for all local governments, it's a public safety pitch to the telco companies, to the mobile providers, to say you got to be out here. But the business pitch is, we got 6,000 people.
Right.
That's a tough sell. I mean, how do you overcome that? I mean,
that's, we're back to essential services again. What are essential services? And I don't want the government up in my business any more than anybody else, but there are times that, the market can't handle these things. The market just doesn't fix them. So, in some of those cases, there are programs and subsidies to try to even out access to, essential services in rural or depressed economies. Right. But that's, out here as mayor, I really try to push for quality of life and economic opportunity. In the equation of what the market is able to do themselves versus what the government needs to do is different than you see in the bigger cities. Right. We don't have a big enough community to have a privately owned, big privately owned YMCA type deal. We have a great little gym that's privately owned, but it's it's different than you would see in the cities with all those fancy YMCAs. So we're working on a project like that. So it changes that formula a little bit, and I think people are okay with that. But it really does go. It's sometimes friction because we're so independent out here and expect to be able to do things on our own. I think it's just tough for people to swallow sometimes that government has to help with some of these things if we want to provide a competitive quality of life.
So let's talk about that for a second. You are one of the co-founders of a company called Bolo Beer Company, and I view that as a quality of life business for sure. I think it's a necessity that people have a way to get together, break bread, have a couple of pops over time. It's certainly, and drink of choice, whatever it is. But what was it like starting a microbrewery in a very small town?
Yeah, it's well, the reason we did it is because when I got out here, like I said, we're the end of the line for a lot of supply chains. There wasn't good craft beer on the shelf. I mean, right. Craft in Valentine was Sam Adams, which was craft 20 years ago, So we decided to start it, and part of it is we have literally the purest water in the world. We're on top of the Ogallala Aquifer. That water is filtered by sand when it goes down, and it is legitimately perfectly pure. So starting that locally, we recruited a brewer to come out here. He's actually the chamber president. They've been here for about 5 years now. He and his wife, been a great addition to town, and went through the process. Really didn't have a lot of issue. I mean, there were a few people concerned just because didn't know exactly what breweries were and what the activity was. But we've tried to make it a really family-friendly place. It's just open to anybody, all races, creeds, and it's a place it's a place to build social fabric. It's one of those third places, and it's just a little different than your a typical bar. It's got a different attitude to it, and it's food manufacturing really in the end.
So in a way, it's like Valentine's version of Ole's.
Right. Without food.
Right. Yeah. For those of you who are, for the non-Nebraskans watching, when you go through the state, after you stop in Valentine, you need to, drop back down to I-80, hit Paxton, and go to Ole's Big Game Bar, and you will be delighted with your experience there. So, but first, naturally, stop at Bolo Beer. Tell us a little bit, so I'm a mortgage lender, right? And my job is to facilitate the mortgage, but really my job is to find people who need something that they don't really want, right? Nobody wants a mortgage, much like nobody wants the government really kind of up in their business. But you have to facilitate that, and you have to bring people together. And you're in a unique position as an economic development person of like, you've got a unique thing. How do you develop an economy in a very rural place? How do you do business development? I've read some things about what you've done with the university and the design studio to kind of freshen up Main Street, to bring a Shopco to town. For those of you who don't know what a Shopco is, it's like a Target for those of you on the kind of the East and the West Coast. But how do you develop something that is so raw and unique unto itself that in a lot of ways isn't looking for a ton of people to come into it, but also needs people to know where it is and what it's about?
Yeah, my attitude's evolved on that too. So I helped bring Shopco to town. It's, they had a pharmacy when we needed one. They had a bunch of dry goods, kind of general store, Target light, so to speak. They closed. It was bought by a private equity group that leveraged all their real estate, and they popped. So now we don't have one. And so I look back to the time and effort that I put into getting Shopco into Valentine, and it was a lot. We had to give them, they wanted tax increment financing, and there were a lot of resources that went into getting Shopco here. And everybody loved having Shopco here and thought it was a good idea. But now what are we left with? Nothing. A big giant building that could probably be bought pretty cheap right now. So our strategy is to grow our own. Our jobs in town are either jobs that have been created. They're either ranch jobs. They're jobs that have been created by local government or State Department of Roads, National Park Service, or it's businesses that have started as mom and pops in Valentine and grown, to 3, 4 to 40 employees. And that's, when you do it that way, you're able to start small. It's a little bit lower risk. You're able to build relationships in the community. And these businesses, I think, care more. They're more apt to participate in fund drive or fundraising, in supporting other activities. So we're all completely shifting our focus to entrepreneurial support. Trying to help people take something from the garage to Main Street, and helping those Main Street businesses either transition to the next generation or expand through new products or new services.
Right. So just before we came on, we were talking a little bit. I want to be mindful of your time. So if you got to jump, just say, hey, I got to jump. But real quick, and this is something I've offered help to folks who may need it in my area or wherever, is as part of the CARES Act is, an expansion of SBA lending / grants. You guys with Sandhills, obviously, have probably a crosshairs on your back right now. Like, how do I do that? What do I do? What does that look like?
That's
for you?
interesting. I feel like I've been married to that CARES Act the last 2.5 days since it really came out. So there are two components or two programs through the stimulus for the CARES Act right now. One is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the other is the Paycheck Protection Program. And so the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, was pushed out within the last week or so. And basically people could get an emergency advance of up to $10,000 in conjunction with an SBA loan. You had to have economic harm as a result of this pandemic in order to qualify for that. But there's a little bit of question regarding, is that forgivable then after the fact? The big push though is the $350 billion in the Paycheck Protection Program. And effectively what you can get is 2.5 times whatever your average monthly payroll is in the form of a loan through the bank that is forgiven through the Small Business Administration if you follow certain criteria. So in effect, of that money, 75% has to be spent on payroll, and the other 25% has to be spent on, or if there are other expenditures outside of payroll, it has to be spent on qualifying expenses such as utilities, rent, or mortgage payments.
So general operation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of we're seeing a lot of action with that right now, and it's a really helpful program. But it tells me the government's planning on this thing being at least another 2 months.
Yeah, for sure. We just had somebody say, "Hey, tell Kyle my best friend dad is over at Cherry Hill Estates assisted living." So I guess somebody here who's less than a mile from me right now, who's got a best friend whose old man is out by you.
Small world.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can kind of bring this thing home a little bit. Is there anything you want to close with?
No, I mean, I think, Valentine is different. All these places are different, but I think, it's, they're all still tied together. I mean, just that last comment that you made, somebody lives a mile from you, 7 states away, they're connected to somebody in the assisted living center up in Valentine. So it's this pandemic's been really wild, but the cool part is just the connection that I think people are really starting to appreciate more than ever before, and our ability to come together as communities and just make things happen. So the only other thing I'd add is we didn't talk much about Valentine's tourism, but if you're into golf, floating, fishing, hunting, or beer drinking, which I consider tourism in some cases, Valentine's the place to be. I mean, we've got top 100 golf courses, top 10 fly fishing and kayaking rivers, and several 100,000 acres of public ground around here. That's just, it's a playground. It's why I'm here.
Well, talk about that for a second. I mean, take 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever. And I mean, there's a mutual friend of ours, mutual fraternity brother of ours, a guy named Andy Pollock, started the Sandhills Marathon, which has made the bucket list of races to run, right? And it's just a beast of a race. You've got the river, you've got the golf. Talk about that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so Valentine is right on the Niobrara River, and it's a national wild and scenic river, and it's all spring fed. And it is just a beautiful little float. There's I think there's like 90 waterfalls within the confines of the wild and scenic river area out here in the middle of Nebraska. I think there's like 100,000 people that go down the river every summer. We have the Prairie Club, which is a brand new golf course that opened. Well, brand new, it's 10 years old now. But there's 2 courses, one of which is in the top 100. One's a Graham Marsh design, another one's Tom Lehman design. We have another golf course going in immediately north of that, and that's a Gil Hance design. It will likely open in the top 100, if not the top 10 in the country. We have a bunch of spring-fed ponds and a big lake out here that has unbelievable panfish and walleye fishing. Great ice fishing too, so there's some seasonality to it. And then we've got the Snake River, which is a little tough to get access to, but it's a top, I think it's a top 15 trout stream. It's a blue ribbon trout stream. So we've got that and all these trails. Yeah, Pollock's marathon, it started by him and some buddies. They drove this cut across road, which is called Brownlee Road. It's an oil road. And they drove it and they realized it was almost the exact distance of the marathon. So when they came up fishing one year, they decided to go run it, and they did it. And then the next year, I think some more friends came, and then they made it to Sandhills Marathon. So that's typically in June. I think they're just watching the climate to see what happens with that. May push it till fall, but yeah, there's cool stuff to do out here.
Awesome. Well, I'm really. Oh, we got a question from RJ Kronk. Is Bolo offering curbside pickup at this time?
It is.
Yes. So I'm going to reply to RJ. It's a big yes, buddy. So
we just figured out how to put ordering on our website too, so we'll deliver on certain days.
Even better. Well, look, I'm really, really appreciative of your time. It's a busy time where you are. You got your hands full with a lot of different things. I'm grateful for the time. I'm hopeful that you guys are able to kind of, in as much as possible, fly beneath the radar. I don't know that any of us really can right now, but that you get through this largely unscathed, and that the community is able to thrive as the summer comes along. And people are able to get up, into your area, get on the river, get out, play some golf, and support the local community. And that kids are able to get back into school, certainly in the fall, play a little football as time comes along.
Sure.
But much success to all of you, much health, and again, just a lot of gratitude for you for spending some time. We actually didn't really talk all that much about Sandhills Bank, but if you are, Nebraskan and you're looking for a fantastic community bank to work with, I would highly recommend Sandhills State Bank.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, it's we're taking it day by day and holding our people close. I know we're gonna get through this and bounce back. So
good deal. All right. Well, I closed the way I opened always, and just a reminder for everyone, wherever you are, go Big Red. And if you're not a Nebraska fan yet, you will be soon. So, all right. Thanks so much, Kyle. I appreciate it, man.
We'll see you later.
All right.